This is Hot Mike.
Hot Mike.
On the networks of WDAY. Here's Dom Izzo.
Welcome back, everybody. Hour 2 ready to rock and roll here on this Wednesday morning. Yeah, I know we're getting ready for the NCAA basketball tournament, but football's never far from the brain of many football fans here in town. It's great to have the head ball coach, Tim Palasek, is with us. Are you allowed to fill out a bracket now? Is there NCAA rules again? You can't do that, right?
Colleen is not having that. And it's funny.
It's amazing nowadays. I still don't get that.
Randy and I were having a conversation. He's like, I'm not on the docket anymore. And he's just joking. But, he gets to fill one out and participate and do those fun things. But, no, with anything that's tied to gambling, our staff stays
Go ahead and pull
away.
that closer to you. That's both. I appreciate it. I'll just roll my eyes at that because where we're at in college athletics these days is whatever. But you're a hooper, right? You follow it. You enjoy this next little stretch, right?
Yeah, I like this time of year. It's one of my favorite times of the year. Since being at Iowa, actually, I would add in the wrestling tournament.
Oh, man.
Unbelievably intense. But basketball, yeah, growing up, Coach Gazer and I don't play much, pickup ball or anything like that. I'm into pickleball now, but I think this time of the year signifies, a turn of, okay, we're trying to develop our football team. What are we going to be in 2025? And then it's centered around this, month-long basketball tournament that's really intriguing. It probably once, before was a little bit more intriguing. Would there be a Cinderella story or two or three with the state of things and, the best of the best continuing to move up and gathering talent onto one team? But it's a fun time. I mean, you still got to put the ball in the hole. You can get hot, get some stops. I really enjoy it.
You'll get David started talking about where things are in college. You and Richmond, I'm sure, have talked quite a bit about where things are on college basketball these days, right?
Yeah. It's interesting that, I do I've been fascinated by Dave's approach over the last year.
Yeah.
Like attack everything. Can you do it just a little bit better than the others? A long time ago, I think Mark D'Antonio, ironically, the guy that Coach Bowl beat out for the GA job here, right, was the head coach at Michigan State.
Yeah.
And I had a little bit of a conversation with him, maybe in 2012, and he said, Tim, everybody's dealing with a shortage of a D tackle or dealing with a shortage of, a safety in the spring. Everyone's got issues. It's a matter of how you attack them. And do you embrace the challenges of today and just keep moving forward and have fun with it?
So I want to start with a big picture question because Matt Rule, the head coach at Nebraska, said about spring football and a spring game, essentially, not going to do it. And there's others that have followed suit on that. I would guess I'll throw that at you. Is spring football in jeopardy of going away? In like 5 years, are we not going to have this anymore?
I think there's a good chance with the spring approach, you could have, a choice between getting 20 workouts in and June being included. Because more people want their team, based on when the portal windows fall, want their team on campus to work with them. So you might see 8 workouts in the spring along with training, which is really important. That's the thing that's gotten lost. You need an 8-week window to train your guys. And then you might take 8 to 10 more workouts in June.
Okay.
With your camps and things like that. So I think you're going to see it maybe get spread out a little bit more. A lot of coaches, Paul Chris was the first one, the old Wisconsin coach, that made me think about, is a spring game really necessary? To pick teams to have tackles jumping on both sides of the, so we kind of are in the middle. We're going to do a lot of game-like situations, ones on ones, twos on twos, twos on ones, so forth and so on, but we don't necessarily pick a team out and then get into 2 separate locker rooms and then let's play for a coupon at Doolittle's.
What you're saying, though, that model is similar to what the NFL does, the OTA kind of thing, where we'll meet for a few weeks in April, then we're gonna go again in June, and then it's camp begins in late summer.
Yeah, I love where we're at right now. I really have a lot of belief in Ryan Napoli and Jim Kramer and our strength and conditioning and how much we are a developmental program, but we don't just say that. We need 8 weeks of training.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's very little football. Get away from the kids. Let's recruit. Let's reevaluate, reestablish what we want to do the next year. Look at our concepts. But then this week for us, we call it mini camp. Okay, a little bit more meeting time. Some skills and drills tied in with the strength and conditioning. And then next week, Monday, obviously, we start practice 1. And so for us, it's really a holistic view of what do the players need. I think so much of this conversation right now, whether you're talking about the portal or you're talking about moving football season up, a year from now, there's a chance we're going to be in fall camp on July 23rd. Well, what about the kids' opportunities to be kids and to train them for 7 to 8 weeks in the summer? And that's why I think why you're seeing some reoccurring injury stuff in the National Football League, and you're seeing some more injury stuff. I don't know that we're necessarily training and preparing we are at NDSU going to hold on to that.
Yeah.
But overall, are we training our guys enough?
But the thought of, like, we're not going to have a spring game because I don't want to expose our talent, that sounds BS to me. Is that accurate?
Well, you know what?
Everybody has tape now. They can see everybody.
No, but the tape is one thing, but to see it live, you got to remember now, being in the Mountain West with Wyoming, it didn't occur to me until after we lost another batch in 2020, or 22. Like, well, how is this happening, right? Like, how are people getting to the high school coach? How are people getting to these agents? Well, we're playing on a Thursday night and a Friday night. Okay, I know what I do on a Friday night in the hotel room. I watch whatever game is on.
Yep.
Okay, maybe you see a situation that you have to be ready for the next day, but I think there are a lot of people that are looking at talent any way that they can look at it and find it. And in Matt Rule's defense, if this is the last go around with the spring portal, that would be your one more opportunity.
Correct.
With the 105. With the 105 deal, maybe he's on to something, and you can get something done with a practice. Coach Ferentz felt the same way. Like, he didn't like the televised football game in spring on the Big Ten Network.
More going this way of the showcase kind of deal from what your colleagues have told you and what you guys are doing?
I think people don't want to lose, if they're doing 10 workouts or if they're doing 15, they don't want to lose that practice opportunity. And for us, we segment our installation much different than Coach Bowl or Chris Kleiman did or Matt Entz. And so that 15th practice falls right in the middle of one of our sequencing. We need that 5th day of that situation. And this is the best way for us to tie it together while still showing the fans and be able to showcase and have a fun day.
I thought last year actually was really good for the first year of doing something like that. I thought you guys hit it out of the park for what you did last year.
I thought the marketing, we were close to an A+, right? I thought the
You
staff,
mic'd up was fantastic. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I can be better. I think, we probably have to minimize how many players are available throughout, because it's just not the normal game flow. It's a practice flow, and I want to get in and out of the workout within an hour and a half. And so it was exciting last year, and I think we're going to bring the people back on the field.
Nice.
The team makers and so forth, and things like that, and have them be closer to the action, maybe for a goal line setting.
That's cool.
So I'm looking forward to it.
For people that don't know, Tim, after the season ends, is there any contact you are allowed to have between then, early January after Frisco and, say, this week? What contact can the coaches have, if any, with the team?
Oh, no, if we wanted to, we get 8 hours a week.
Okay.
That's strength and conditioning, football meetings, skills and drills. We basically can't do any coaching where there's a football involved. So I can't be coaching the quarterback while he's throwing to Bryce Lance.
Yeah.
We can't be doing 11-on-11 stuff and then putting the ball up in the air or handing it off or tackling, right? So it's very much how I would describe it is we can work fundamentals with our guys. It's just we choose to use our strength and conditioning to get bigger, faster, and stronger. Okay, and then we do some leadership things on Wednesdays where we're talking about chapters of a book. We break out into groups and we talk about issues, in society, issues with college sports. We talk about our football team and moving it forward, and there's a lot of emphasis on leadership development. It wasn't until this week that we really dove into some football movements and fundamentals, because I really do believe it's not what we do, it's how we do it.
The program you had last year, how much to say, okay, well, that really worked, we're going to do that again? Or how much did you want to tinker with it after what you did last year?
No, we're adding a couple sessions within our practices that I think can be really helpful to both the offense and the defense. For an example, offensively, we just still can take more advantage of RPO type situations, and have a willingness to throw those quick bubble screens or quick things out there. And I don't know exactly what those are. Are they jailbreak screens? Are they slow screens and RPOs off of runs? Defensively, they need to see a little bit more of that, because it's every week I'm commenting on, well, these guys are a split the field concept team that throws screens and the ball's out quick. It's hard to get a pass rush. So we're implementing a little bit of that in segments, and then we'll also work, some run under pressure where our defense is forced to be in some bad situations with blitzes. Okay, and then conversely, offensively, we're in some bad situations. Can the quarterback get us the hell out of the situation?
Okay.
And so I'm looking forward to those two things. Otherwise, for the most part, recruiting, fall camp, that looks like it's all going to fall in line with last year.
You mentioned potentially next year, from what you're hearing on, this is 26, would there be another signing window? Is that, I know we've talked about that. Is that getting any traction yet or no?
Those things all go for proposal and then they get voted on. As far as next year, the one thing that I've already cultivated a game plan for is that we'll be in fall camp on July 23rd.
No kidding. It's going to start that early. Wow.
Everybody will essentially play 12 games.
Wow.
And so, that stresses Todd Phelps out a little bit with the scheduling and things like that. But I think that's the direction we're moving, especially if they talk expansion
of the college football playoff.
Yeah. And the college football playoff. Yeah. And the one thing I really am excited about, I just think there's some new teams emerging in the FCS. I think we got I think the schedule is perfect for us. And I don't really care how we, the results immediately, but it's going to help us. We go on the road 2 times.
Yeah.
Early, I like that. Let's get in a foxhole mentality and go.
Your first year as OC was like that. Was at Iowa State, at Weber, then College Game Day, of course, was here after that. But that was unique in its own right of starting the first 2 games on the road.
It is. It is always unique when you start out on the road, period.
Yep.
Much more comfortable to be starting at home in your own facilities.
You haven't done that yet as head coach yet.
Yeah, no, but again, those are things that I do enjoy, trying to prepare the team, doing some different things at the end of camp to kind of, okay, this is a road mentality. We might look at something. Do we go somewhere to have a practice? And I've got those wheels turning right now. It'll be interesting.
I got one email here before we go to break asking, and I know I've asked you this as well, the one item that either keeps you up or the one item you're constantly watching in college football right now.
No, the item that constantly keeps me up is just, are we doing everything we can so that our players have the ability to reach their full potential, and are they happy? This thing, like achieving happiness, it only happens 10% of a week. Pure happiness and pure joy. And sometimes I think our young people don't necessarily understand that. It's enjoying the process. It's attacking the process. I really want our kids to enjoy their time. I want them to work and be the best they can be. But that's the one thing that keeps me up is just, are we excited for the day?
That's good. That's good. I did not think you were going to go there. I thought it would be the portal. Like, am I checking it every day? Who's there?
Well, that ties into that, though.
Yes, correct.
Happy kids stay.
Stay. Exactly right. Let's break. We come back. We got. Let's talk about some players that we're going to be keeping an eye on in spring ball, and some other topics we got to hit with that ball coach. Tim Palasek's here in studio. We're back on Hot Mic right after this. Welcome back, everybody. Back with Tim Palasek. NDSU spring football begins on Monday, bright and early, huh?
Yes, sir.
When are you up? You're up and going anyway. What time are you normally up?
I'm actually probably more of a night person
really?
than a morning
person.
Okay. But I think, believe it or not, most of our kids would choose, like if our school came in and said, if North Dakota State came in and said, hey, extracurricular activities are open till 10 o'clock, they would love to be done every day. Lifting, practice, the whole 9. At Iowa, we were a morning outfit.
Okay.
And I actually enjoy it. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're in the AM. We'll be starting practice or the activities at 6. And then Fridays are at 3:30, so that allows us to have junior days during the day.
Which are huge this time of year because you've got, is it mostly 26 or some 27 guys it'll be
This
here?
will be mostly 26 now.
Okay.
We had a lot of 26s and 27s. We had 220 kids on campus in January.
Wow.
So we had 3 what we call big junior days. I mean, show and tell, first glance, if they haven't been to a game, right? And then these ones will be much more specific to the talent that
and these are individualized.
Yes, more 10 to 15 guys.
Yep. I want to get a couple of thoughts on staff movement because we haven't talked to you since with Jake Landry going to get the Iowa State gig. First, give us your thought process on, okay, I know you had, I think, an idea of what you wanted with Jake, and obviously that probably was more than 1 year. So he comes to you and says, I got this opportunity. Is it Dan Larson right away on your list of what you're going to do after that?
Well, Dan and Jake were both under heavy consideration last year. And to be honest, Jake was qualified. Jake, I trusted. We were going to work together at some point.
You knew, obviously, from your past job. Yep.
But really what played into that was Randy and not knowing where he was at for that specific year. Not knowing Randy's future, whether it was going to be 3, 5, or 1 year or 1 minute more. I really wanted to have a quarterback coach in place with the other guys because we weren't broken. Well, while the conversations are going on with Jake, we were having a lot of conversations with Dan Larson and how this would look. So honestly, in year one, it was circumstantial. I didn't want to disrupt the O-line, and I really didn't feel that great about an O-line coach being an OC.
Yeah.
I probably should have felt better about that than I did. I'm happy for Jake. But Dan Larson and Jake were under consideration last year. And then the more I was around it, Dan's a much better big picture guy than just an O-line guy.
Okay.
He has head coaching experience. He's coordinated. He's coached multiple positions, kind of like myself. So I've always appreciated his football approach.
Joe Bishoner also did this as well, and I know visiting with him briefly how excited he is to get back to work with quarterbacks. Just for people that, he's been the guy like you were that used to be the tight end and running backs and special teams. How can Joe put maybe his own statement on QB coach?
Well, I think now, this day and age, it's interesting. Number one, Joe's going to do a good job. I really like his football approach. I like what he did on special teams. He showed versatility with that. And then you dig into his resume and you get to know him over the course of the year, him and Beth. I've been very appreciative of their work with the community and their willingness to do whatever it takes. But in short time, I realized Joe had connections and relationships with a lot of players on the team. Okay, in today's college football, the players better be considered with who gets hired. It's just the way it is. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, under Craig Bowl, he's hiring the best football coach he can hire, and the kids will adjust. Well, nowadays, I think we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And the fact that Joe had strong relationships with those players, he had coached the quarterbacks for 10-plus years, had success with it, has strong opinions on some things, and was willing to look at what Randy had done and then marry up the two things because we have two veteran, older quarterbacks coming back.
Will he still do special teams?
No, we will. Right now, it's interesting. I thought you'd ask me, okay, where are the competitions this spring?
I'll get there. Don't worry.
Carlton Littlejohn's got a great chance to be our special teams coordinator,
Okay.
Devin Kleiman.
Okay.
Will Johnson and Sam O'Jury both want roles. And so we're kind of going to let some people coach some things and introduce some things. I'm going to be in those meetings. That's probably after year one. You haven't asked me this question yet either, but what was the one thing that you missed or that you felt strong? It was special teams was the thing that I'm finding that I want to micromanage a little bit over all else. Just because
that's going old school for you. You used to do that. So you mentioned to me Dylan Chmura's name the week of the Tennessee State game, which set in the back of my mind, like, okay, that's just a name to get going. And obviously when the opening happened, was that a no-brainer for you that I got to call him?
Well, it's interesting you picked up on that because I had two young sophomores, right, the most impressionable age. Like, you're going to hire that guy that was at Tennessee State. You mentioned him in the team meeting. You mentioned him in the press conference. He was your GA.
Yep.
Joe Pavlik from Montana, he was your GA. He's going to Western Michigan. So I was like, wow, they do care.
Paying attention. Yep.
And no, Dylan, relationship strong. Worked with him for 2 years. Was around him when he was at Bemidji State. He's been up here at camp. I think he has a full understanding of what we're doing and how we want to do it. And it was really important that we still hired from within how I see the offensive line. And Dan was doing a great job, and those two will marry up really, really nicely. And Dylan's a tireless recruiter. He's got a good personality, and he comes from a football background. I really am excited about this hire.
His dad's an all-time Packer, so that doesn't hurt, right?
That's right. And I got a chance to meet him, and he spoke before our Michigan loss, I think, in 2018 or 19.
Oh, okay.
And he still looks like he could play. He is a monster.
All right, well, let's talk a little of the battle. And obviously, quarterback's going to come right to mind because Cam Miller's no longer here. You have Cole Payton. Nathan Hayes, I thought, was really impressive in the time he got in there. What does the quarterback look like? Is this Cole Payton's job to lose?
Well, I think initially, you want to react and say, oh, it's open competition. We're not going to worry about it. What happened was Cole got hurt.
Right.
Okay, and like so many other times in our past, in our history here, a guy either takes advantage of that and moves himself forward or he doesn't. I think if Cole never gets injured, we're not even talking about this. But the fact that Cole got hurt and Nathan was able to focus on himself and improve and learn the system, I think now we've got an interesting thing going on where Cole might be, stepping into it like it's his job and, he deserves it. He's going into his senior year. I love his leadership and toughness. But Nathan has some real repetition now within preparation of a game week. And so I think those two are going to continue to push each other like we've had so many times.
You anticipate that this is not going to be settled in the spring, that this is something that you want to see in fall camp?
Yeah, we haven't been able to go through this yet with me being the head coach or, this kind of thing. I just telling you, the sooner the better.
Okay.
That all parties know. I think the fact that, Nathan has gotten better, let's make sure these repetitions aren't necessarily ones and twos, but I've really strongly suggested to Joe and Dan, Cole Payton gets to play this concept left to right 5 times. Nathan gets the same thing, left to right. So just making sure we rep those guys out, fairly, the margins aren't too big.
Okay.
Where in the past, the one guy gets X, the 2 guy gets X. I want that to be pretty even, Steven. I really looking forward to answering some of these questions, come practice 8 or 9, 10, once we get through third downs. Because is there a discrepancy or something that we're unaware of? But Cole Payton's toughness and leadership is elite, and our guys will die for him.
Cam Miller told me he would vote for him for captain last year. That's how much of his leadership he valued, Cole Payton.
And I would have supported it. I mean, he was open to being on special teams. He's really throwing it. He's healthy. Nathan and him are running. I mean, they're competing hard. And Nathan's a much better athlete than you give him credit for. And we know Cole's like a top 2 or 3 guy athletically.
I got to ask as well. McFeely's already giving you a hard time. I'm asking about offensive line because we asked you about offensive line last year. But you got to replace 2 likely NFL tackles. So what does that process look like? I know you have probably guys in mind, but you want to see it obviously develop through spring ball.
Yeah. I think it's more fair this year than it was last. And I never really shared where I was coming from. I believe so much in North Dakota State that you were going to have to convince me that Rock wasn't going to play well in year 6. You were really,
and you were dead on that one.
Yeah,
he played really well.
To convince me that Ponch wouldn't be able to step in.
And he was really good too, but he needed to be.
And then I didn't know about Fraley and Empey. So now let's fast forward to this year. Those 2 are rocks.
Yep.
Okay, Bo Johnson, and it's kind of one of those things like we need him to be, right?
Yep.
So it's not hope, but he's really elevated his conditioning, his mental toughness, in winter conditioning here, and I don't feel good about it, but I'm really excited for his future because if he just kicks the damn door down, he's gonna be a good player. Okay, and then over on the right side, I think maybe the most natural mover of the whole group, natural movement and pass pro. I mean, Mangan I can be plug and play. He's gonna miss some time here in the spring with a slightly torn pec, but that'll also open up the door for Nate for Stummis.
Okay.
And it'll also open the door up for Nate Tasted, who's shown to be a very versatile player. Really, the battle kind of falls on, I think, Nate Sneckloff and Lewinsky.
Okay.
Which
on inside, the other guard.
Inside,
okay.
Which one of those guys is going to say, it's time for me to have a role. It's time for me to get out on the field and be able to have fun with this. Got to play loose. So there's a handful of guys, and then we really like Gage Schmidt as a walk-on. Coy Okeson has really gotten stronger and better, and he missed about 5 or 6 weeks at the end with an issue. So there's some guys that are, in the wild card, and I think it's his time as, Lockerbie.
Okay.
I mean, there's plenty of talent, and I'm challenging him right now on the ding headset. Okay, there's plenty of talent there, and there's plenty of athletic ability. Like, it's time to go step in there and to do it, or we're moving on. Kind of thing, but I'm really excited for him because he's had a big winter. Okay, and he's totally capable.
He's in his 4th year here, so that's kind of time to do it there. Before we go to break, you have time for like 15 more minutes here.
Absolutely.
With Lewinsky starting a couple games, does that give him a lead or not? Or no, or not in your mind?
Probably if he wouldn't have gotten injured in there again, and had the hamstring and then missed. That's the thing, right? These guys, we talk every day in our program when we get a chance to talk to the whole team. Okay, if your parents are, interested in when you play, it's real simple. Consistent improvement leads to credibility and trust. When your son consistently improves and consistently performs, that's when he'll develop a role, and then it's his job to grow those roles. So that's where spring ball is exciting. Yeah. Now, I'm telling you, Nate Tasted, could jump right into that competition. That competition may not even exist if Devin makes his mind up that it's my time.
Time to play.
And he could potentially be one of our better swing guys that could move out to tackle as well.
See, there's my first offensive line question. I'm going to mark it down how many I get you before the season
That's all right.
starts.
Let's rock and roll.
Let's break. We come back. A few other positions we want to talk about, and some other stuff that's going to be changing for Bison football and FCS football in 2025. Back with the head ball coach here in studio right after this. Welcome back, everybody. Tim Palasek joining us here. This is great. We're getting the head coach here. Spring ball begins on Monday. I got an email in to ask, do you get any reciprocal check for Tristan Wirfs signing the major deal, the biggest deal an NFL offensive lineman ever got? Because you recruited him to Iowa, correct?
Well, I got there right in the middle of, or right at the end of his recruitment.
Okay.
So I coached him as
You
a
were the
true
closer.
freshman. Yeah. Well, NDSU has gotten some benefit already. Crutchley and I were down there last spring, and he canceled our hotels. We got to stay at his house, on his street. No, quite frankly, it's interesting. My wife and I were down there for vacation at Clearwater, and we went out to lunch or dinner, one of the two, and some drinks. And she sneaks off and pays the bill. Well, he orders 5 meals. And he's like, and he had like a little bit of a tear in his eye, like, Coach, nobody ever buys for us.
Wow.
And I said, well, this is a true relationship. He's such a good kid.
And
I'm trying to get him up here for spring practice to be around our guys a little bit.
that would be pretty good,
Yep.
considering that. You also have, for your coaching clinic, you're going to have a headline guy that's going to be speaking here in a couple weeks, and Aaron Taylor's going to be here.
I'm glad you brought that up. This clinic's going to be fantastic. Our staff has never been more involved, very specific to fundamentals. But Aaron Taylor and I built the relationship because of his connection to Harry Heastan. Harry Heastan was Notre Dame's O-line coach, the Bears, multiple NFL stops.
Okay.
Harry Heastan comes out of the Joe Moore tree. Coach Ferentz comes out of the Joe Moore tree. Aaron Taylor runs the Joe Moore Award. So he's the one that picks the best offensive line in college football. Well, he's also including NDSU film on their website now. He just loves how we play.
Pretty good.
And then he's really big, obviously, with the coverage of college sports. He does games, so I got to meet him that way. And then on top of that, he's really, mental health, championship mindset. And so I think our guests, people that show up, are going to be really blown away by this guy's approach. And he was a Packer in a Super Bowl.
That's the last check mark on that. I have to ask, because we're getting close to this. I'm just looking at another mock draft here that Gray Zabel, now I see as high as 16, to the Arizona Cardinals. So what are the NFL teams, when they're calling you, what are they asking you about him?
Yeah, I was listening to a radio show today, I think Dan Patrick. They were talking about, how is there so much movement this time of year? The film's out there. Well, these interviews.
Yeah.
Carson Wentz did the same thing.
Absolutely right.
Until these GMs, until the coaches got to interview and see his football IQ, his demeanor. So, what I've heard specifically, I'm not going to say the teams, but I've heard from 4 or 5 people, like, this guy, one of our best interviews out of the 25 that we've had. How so? He really embraced a lot of the changes that we made with our protections and how we allocate where the O-line's going, how they're going there, his knowledge on safety rotation. And when you can express that to a O-line coach in an interview, that's kind of comforting. Like, okay, this guy is more than just the guy that's going to line up and know who he has to block.
Go. Yeah.
He can anticipate based on what he sees. And he's really done a good job with that. And then his combine performance, right? And he's doing this all at 315. If there were any questions on him, it was like, can he get up to 320? Can he put some weight on? I mean, he played at roughly 307, and he's up to 315. He's good strength levels. And I think his demeanor, football IQ, and consistency with his personality is really going to help him and continue to help him.
Pro Day is next week, correct?
Pro Day is the 27th.
Okay.
That Thursday. That'll be fun.
How many teams? I mean, Cam Miller did not get invited to the Combine, so I have to imagine there's going to be more teams here to get a look at Cam next week.
Well, I think I haven't gotten the complete list yet. And quite frankly, Derek Lucan handles all of our relations with the NFL. And I don't really get too wrapped up in all 32 teams here because all 32 teams came to fall camp.
That's right.
And then I would say 15 to 18 of them came back 2 or 3 times.
And they were here for games, too.
And they were here for games as well. And so it's like they share the numbers, they share the information for Gray and for Cam and for all of our guys. It's really about how many personal interviews do they get or personal workouts following that pro day. And Gray's got a heck of a lineup.
I think the really neat part about it now, they changed this a couple years ago where the college guys can throw to their teammates, which is a neat deal. So I'm assuming Bryce Lance is going to be out there catching for Cam Miller one more time.
Well, you kind of asked about why would Matt Rule not do a spring game. I don't want too many of our underclassmen out in front on a showcase, but we're going to do everything we can for Cam to have a great performance. And therefore, I think Bryce and, he'd really like Chris Harris or Mackay, one of those two guys to support Braylon, to support Joe Stoffel. So we'll have a couple underclassmen out there catching balls.
That's pretty cool. Just the whole allure of pro day. I can remember your first tenure here. We're doing the old BSA, right, on the tartan floor.
Unbelievable.
And now where it's, I'm looking around and when Carson's pro day, I'm like, this is unbelievable. All 32 teams are here. It's unbelievable.
And I'm so thankful for the Billy Turners and the Joe Haggs and, these guys that have played so well. Dylan Radens, Cordell Volson, the list, son,
look at Chris Board.
Chris
Board's still playing. I tweeted this out. Chris Board was never an all-conference guy. All he's done now, he's been his 8th year in the NFL.
Well, he's really mirrored Ramon Hummer's career, too.
Yeah.
Joe May. So all those former players, what happens is you end up cultivating, obviously with the O-line, you end up cultivating this reputation. At quarterback, there's this reputation. And so what happens is guys start getting the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
You used to see it a lot with like Wisconsin O-linemen. Like, okay, is he really a 4th rounder or was he a free agent? Well, he played at Wisconsin. That's a pretty good deal. And so they've all helped each other and benefited from the success of others. And they know, I think the NFL now knows, especially the Senior Bowl, practice player of the week 4 or 5 times.
Yep.
They know how our guys work and how they get trained and the expectation levels here, and they love that.
A couple other things before we get to players. Helmet communication. I know you and I talked about it last year. You had it for the Colorado games. Is it a full go for 2025?
The way I understand it, for sure, I'm 100% convinced in the Missouri Valley it's full steam ahead. And then actually, I think what's going to happen is some FCS schools are going to have to be, okay, do we want them to have that advantage and us not? So they're going to have to either move forward or not. But, yeah, we'll be practicing with it. I asked Coach Larson, with the one field, let's go 75% of the time with that communication. It's so imperative.
Okay.
And so I'm really excited about that. I just, get rid of this sign stealing, get rid of this, that, and the other thing. And plus, it'll make for a more exciting game at the end of halves and at the end of games because you'll be able to execute 2-minute drill even better.
I got to ask we mentioned Bryce Lance, to have him back, how much, for those guys, Bryce and a few others, how much are we going to see them out during spring ball? Is that something we're like, okay, we don't need you to do every single rep, or do you have a different philosophy on that?
No, I think spring ball versus fall camp, you're talking 2 different things.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see Bryce because he's put on 7 pounds lean muscle mass. He broad jumped, I think 10 or 10.9.
Wow.
I think 11 feet's in his future. Vertical leap, number 1. Power output, on some of the technology we have, number 1. It's a fine line because we need a double rep. There's too many guys that need the repetitions, and right now, when you look at receiver, we have 11. Well, fall camp will have 15 or 16. So I would be much more conscious of it. Of what does a guy need in the fall compared to, in spring ball you have a day off in between,
and you go
a weekend off. So I think Bryce is going to want to be out there.
The fact, you can write home on this forever. You were right on about this. This time last year, I was asking you about guys, and this was one that you said. So, is there one? Do you have like this? Say, boy, pick the click. Like, okay, I think he's bound for he can break out in 2025.
It won't be as shocking because he's already made some plays happen on special teams. But Jackson Williams, there's just an interesting deal going on with whether you call it like the number 3 with Raja Nelson being out, but the number 3, 4, 5, 6 spot, Silas Evans, Kate Osterman, Conklin is going to show up on special teams.
Okay.
I'm really excited about that. And then I really am interested to see who becomes the backups linebackers. Okay. Is there a role for a safety as, a nickel? And then another safety gets to play safety. There's some competition. There's some spots that were really deep. And there's just other positions where we're going to see guys for the first time.
I want to ask about linebacker before we wrap up here, because Nathaniel Staling, I know, is a guy that you had high hopes for last year, then got dinged up. Austin Altapeter got his first real chance to play, and he had to deal with a back injury. That's a spot linebacker. You've lost some guys there. Where are you looking at those two guys, maybe some others that could maybe step up in spring football?
Donovan Woolen is the guy we talked about last year. No,
he's a freak too.
Yeah,
he's a huge
and
man.
he's had a big spring. He can long snap. I just kind of
is that right?
Yeah,
wow.
I learned that today. It was the first time I really watched him doing it. As we were walking out of the building, they started doing some things, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. Obviously we can't coach and do that stuff right now, but I think between Enoch, Donovan, Altapeter, Nathaniel, right? Like that's going to be kind of the core of it, and then you got your bell cow and Cop, right? Of these freshmen coming in, we got to cultivate some opportunity. Like, can they play in base? But then you got a kid in town, right? Like Andrew Luck has done a really good job in learning this stuff. He's cultivated some roles in special teams. I really think he could end up being a formidable backup. That's a position we have to develop some depth at, and I probably don't have clear and concise answers today.
That's something, though, maybe by practice 8, 9, you maybe have a better feel of it during the spring?
Yeah, I'd probably actually go as far as saying practice 10 or 11,
okay,
just based on wanting to get through our third down packages. Because that's where all the adjustments happen. Can we adjust a blitz that's 2x2 one way to a blitz that's 3x1 the next with motion and shift, right? Most linebackers could play in a phone booth. It's can they be adjustable with coverage, and are they turned on or turned off in the blitz? And so seeing those guys have to react against our offense with shift, trade, motion will be key.
Donovan Woolen got here last year. We saw the impact he could have and did have. Xander Smith is here, and Miles Money Mitchell are here as well. What can that do to jumpstart their access to the field?
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, number one, with the quarterback, it just gives him a chance to compete and to be able to show his physical tools, because the process might be a little bit slower in the fall compared to just getting here in the summer.
Right.
So he'll have a chance to go out there and earn some repetition, just like Trey Drake. Then at running back, that's one of the guys that, I'd like to see him get tackled a bunch. I'd like to see him be in there a bunch when we're live or when we're thudding, right? Because I don't need to see Marty and Barika get tackled.
Right.
I don't need to see them get thudded. But then, Owen Johnson's back. And,
is he 100%?
And he's 100%.
No kidding. Okay.
He's looked really good. And I think Peter Haugo, going back to linebacker, I think that's what's best for the football team. But I also told Peter, we just need you to take a swing at this. I'd be really comfortable throwing you right back in at running back and getting in the mix as the number 3 or 4 guy. And he's going to be a special team leader for us, if not even a captain.
You're talking about?
Yeah,
really?
Special team leader. I think he could be a ranger, a guy that plays on 4 units. And so that's exciting. But Owen being back, pass protection, catching the ball, that number 3 kind of role, and then seeing if Miles can get on his heels a little bit will be really, really interesting.
You got me jacked for football, man. It's the middle. I'm ready for the basketball tournament. I'm ready to talk football with you. Thanks so much for coming by and doing this. Appreciate it. We'll see you on the football field next week, all right?
No, it's always fun, and I appreciate the coverage, and go Bison.
Tim Palasek joining us here in studio, NDSU head football coach. We'll take our last break. We come back. We'll wrap things up on Hot Mic right after this.